theory is this. Every time the loop begins again, everything resets itself and starts all over. We don't remember anything that happened before, so each time through the loop, we think it's the first.
You mean we could have come into this room, sat at this table, and had this conversation a dozen times already?
A dozen, 100. It's impossible to tell. We could have been trapped here for hours, days, maybe years.
Oh boy, it's a time travel podcast. My name is Nate, and the chief engineer of this podcast is Brian Martin.
Oh, hey, everybody. I predict a warp core breach is imminent.
So, week 2, Star Trek month.
Hitting one of our favorite shows ever. I think that's safe to say, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, when I think of Star Trek, this is my Star Trek.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's
Agreed.
obviously Star Trek has a breadth of shows. It's a huge franchise now. So everybody has their own Star Trek, I feel like.
Any long-running sci-fi show like Doctor Who or something, it's like, well, my doctor is Matt Smith or my doctor is Tom Baker. And like, when it's Star Trek, it's like, well, my Star Trek is The Next Generation, or my Star Trek is the original series movies, or my Star Trek is the 60s show, you know?
Right.
I don't know if anybody's saying my Star Trek is Picard.
That is not a show that led to new viewers, I don't think.
I don't know. I really, like, I genuinely don't know.
Yeah, I don't know who that show was for. I really don't. That is the most confounding thing about that show.
For people who thought they wanted Picard back.
I did want Picard back. I had a whole pitch worked
You
up.
definitely thought you did.
Yeah, right. I really thought I did. I really just thought when they were bringing Picard back, nobody actually thought Picard was going to go back to his vineyard. Did anybody honestly think that was going to be... I mean, I know that's how it was
In All Good Things.
At the end in All Good Things, but even then, it didn't really feel like it rang true, you know?
Right.
Because he never really considered that home. If you go to the episode Family, it was sort of like, okay, you know what? I really don't belong here.
You know, I wonder, though, if there was some sense of guilt that brought him back there. You know, after Robert and Renee burned to death in a fire.
I see what you mean.
In Generations.
Oh, fuck that movie, man.
Like, I remember sitting in the theater with Generations. You know, he gets the message on the holodeck during that boat sequence.
Yeah, the one good thing in that show. I enjoyed that part of the movie.
When Worf got promoted.
Worf got promoted, yeah.
And then he gets the message and he kind of storms off the holodeck and Troy follows him. And the news he got was your brother and nephew burned to death in a fire.
And that the Picard lineage would not continue.
And I was like, what? It was like maybe 2 minutes later in the movie before I was like, can we hold on a second. You just fucking killed him?
Yeah. What was the point of that?
Do you remember the final shot of Family?
Yeah, the kid looking
with
up into the stars.
On the roof, kind of looking at the stars, and, you know, it's like inevitable. This is like a Luke Skywalker looking at the twin suns thing. His destiny lies elsewhere.
In the stars.
Let's cook him.
Yeah. I don't know what the thought process was there. It didn't even really serve a purpose. I guess it was to
make him sad enough, make the idea of the Nexus appealing to him.
It feels to me like whoever wrote that movie, and I think it was Battlestar Galactica.
Ron D. Moore?
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Which is shocking. I feel like they didn't know what would keep Picard in a Nexus, so they made something up, and in order to make it feel true, they had to give him this tragedy, you know, a hole that he's filling in his soul.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can think.
Man, boy, these movies did not do any favors to poor Picard, did they?
No.
Top down, those movies did not do any favors to the character of Jean-Luc Picard.
I don't feel like it treated any of the characters honestly.
That's true, yeah. Rick Berman, Ronald D. Moore, and the scribe of the episode we're talking about tonight, Brannon Braga.
Yeah. Yeah, that episode we'll actually talk about.
That was the crew there, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But they were working under strict guidelines from Paramount, too.
Yeah.
As we discussed last week, the lack of a recognizable love interest from Kirk's past was a paramount decree.
Right. But they were able to kill some characters from the TNG series.
Yeah, right. Off screen.
Off screen. Yeah. Let's dive into the series because the movies really wet the bed. All of them are just horrendous.
Yeah, we'll be able to talk about at least one, possibly two of them at some point.
For sure. But the series as a whole, from like season 3 onward, just magnificent.
Yeah, it really clicked. So many good ones.
Yeah, any show that runs that long has some stinkers here and there, but largely there weren't terrible episodes of that show after season 3, with maybe the exception of that one with Beverly Crusher and that ghost grandma.
Oh, the ghost.
Or she like fell in love with her ghost or something.
Yeah, the Crusher ghost episode is no good.
That's like, it lives in infamy. It's probably the worst episode of the series.
Ugh. Yeah, oh God, it's close, isn't it?
I mean, what's up there with it?
The Riker episode.
Oh, it's the finale of season 2.
Yes, that's the one.
It's a clip show.
Yeah, what is the name of that episode?
Shadows of something?
Shades of Grey. That's
Shades of Grey.
Shades of Grey.
Yeah, that's okay. That rivals it for sure.
Shades of Grey is terrible.
What's terrible about that is its placement. TV shows used to do clip shows. That was a thing. Save money. You know, you're doing 25 other episodes.
It made more sense back then because the thought is that you've probably picked up viewers since the show started, and those viewers haven't had the ability to see some of these older episodes.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
So clip shows, to an extent, made sense in the olden days of television. But once DVD came along, the value of those sorts of episodes really went out the window.
And even at their height, I wouldn't think the finale of a season is a very good idea. Why you want to bring in viewers just to go on summer hiatus?
Yeah, that seems like a really ill-timed spot. A great place would be like winter break or something like that, and you're coming back from that.
Yeah.
You know?
But when we were talking about Quantum Leap, I mean, the nature of television, the landscape has changed so much that they probably would have gone right into reruns back then.
That's true.
All summer long. That was not a good episode.
But if you just kind of tuned in to the episode we're talking about tonight and watched it for, 20 minutes, you might start thinking, is this a clip show?
Well, we teased it last week. This is an episode that we've already spoken about repeatedly on this podcast.
Repeatedly, and that's in keeping with the theme of the episode, I think. The episode we're talking about is Cause and Effect. It is the 18th episode of season 5. The show is really firing on all cylinders at this point.
Yeah, it was actually much later in the series than I thought. I was trying to find it to watch it just last night, actually, and I was thinking this was like a early season 4 kind of thing. But it's late season 5.
As I was going through the season on Paramount Plus to get to this episode, I had to pass by so many bangers. And I'm like, ooh, it's just so many good episodes on the way to this. And in fact, season 5 has at least 3 time travel episodes in it. 4 if you count The Inner Light as a time travel episode.
Which I think we probably shouldn't. But
probably not, but I was thinking like, okay, well, I mean, it's some of the principles are there, of time travel.
Right.
Even though it's not technically a time travel show, Picard is existing like over 100 years in the past, right?
Yeah, that's true. I started to watch this on Pluto, and that app will just run Star Trek like it's the Star Trek channel.
Yes.
Otherwise, you have to go find the episode. But the one that it was just playing was Redemption.
Oh.
And I got stuck in it. I'm like, they're putting together that web of ships to try and detect the secret Romulan envoy that was aiding the Duras family. I got sucked into it. And I was like, no. This was supposed to have to watch Cause and Effect.
Whoa, wait a minute. Doc, are you trying to tell me that my mother has got the hots for me?
Precisely.
Yeah, Cause and Effect. What is that episode about, Brian?
Well, it was written by as mentioned earlier, Brannon Braga. Directed by Jonathan Frakes, which makes this the second Frakes-directed project we've discussed. In what, like 11 episodes?
That didn't turn out so bad after all, Mr. Second Chance Man.
Yeah.
Oh, man. One decidedly more successful than the other.
Certainly. So the episode starts with a particularly rough day on the spaceways, folks. The Enterprise's warp nacelle is venting plasma. Systems aren't responding. The bridge is just catching fire. And then the Enterprise explodes.
Cue the credits.
And then we get the opening titles of the show, which implies that there's still a show.
Yeah, right.
And after those opening titles, it's a typical day on the Enterprise. And the command staff goes from a friendly poker game to investigating another one of those, spatial anomalies that they're always coming across.
Space.
As they ponder the nature of the anomaly, a Federation starship emerges from it on a collision course with the Enterprise. With little time to avoid catastrophe, Riker recommends depressurizing the shuttle bay to move the Enterprise to safety, while Data suggests using a tractor beam to push the oncoming ship aside. Picard goes with Data, as one does, but the other ship still collides with the warp nacelle, creating a catastrophic failure that results in the Enterprise exploding. After the commercial break, we catch up once again with the Enterprise. It's a normal day, and the command staff goes from a friendly poker game to investigating another one of those spatial anomalies. As they ponder the nature of the anomaly, a Federation starship emerges from it on a collision course with the Enterprise. With little time to avoid catastrophe, Riker recommends depressurizing the shuttle bay to move the Enterprise to safety, while Data suggests using a tractor beam to push the oncoming ship aside. Picard goes with Data, as one does, but the other ship still collides with a warp nacelle, creating a catastrophic failure that results in the Enterprise exploding. Now, this all sounds familiar. It's because the Enterprise is in fact trapped in a temporal causality loop, repeating the same day over and over.
I thought you were going to go again. Don't think I don't see what you were doing there.
I could. They're kind of groundhogging it, if you will.
Yeah.
Each run-through culminating in the destruction of the ship. Their only hope of escape is somehow becoming aware of the phenomenon in which they're trapped, and then finding a way to break the cycle, which is what the whole episode is about, as we keep repeating this same section of time over and over and over again. It's been a long time since this show aired for the first time.
Yeah.
Do you remember seeing this episode for the first time, or what your first encounter with it was?
I don't specifically remember. In fact, when I was watching it for the podcast, I was surprised that it was so Beverly-centric.
Yeah.
This is a Beverly Crusher episode.
It is kind of, yeah.
Like the series always would kind of single out a character to do an episode around. I wouldn't say it's quite like that. It's very ensemble, but she's definitely the lead of 100%. This episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did not recall it that way.
Yeah,
so,
neither did I. I had it pictured in my head as a Data-centric, if anything.
Yeah, because of the resolution of the episode.
Yes, yeah.
I think. I mean, altogether it works. Dr. Crusher, not known for better episodes.
No, if there's a Crusher episode where she's in her quarters and starts hearing voices, you know you're in for some shit.
Yeah.
But not this time. Not this time.
Crusher episodes never really did it for me. Troy episodes were rarely very good.
No, but I'll tell you what, Crusher and Troy both did it for me. But those episodes, not so much.
Both of those ladies got much better looking the older they got. Yeah. They both aged really gracefully.
Kind of like Jonathan Frakes. Kind of not kidding. He can still get it.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, the nature of this show was to have episodes centered around characters. Was there a character, and again, we'll come back to the topic at hand, but I think we knew there were going to be tangents.
This is a story about repetition, not tangents.
Well, for variety's sake,
okay, yeah.
Was there a character whose episodes you looked the most forward to? Because there were Data episodes, there's
Picard
Worf
and Data.
episodes.
It was generally Picard and Data episodes that I was always the most keen for.
Well, they became the stars of the movies, didn't they?
Yeah, and boy, Data was like the Wolverine of the Star Trek movies.
Yeah, the Star Trek movies manufactured this relationship between Picard and Data that wasn't there.
Right.
If you watch that series, Data's best friend was Geordi.
Picard certainly stuck his neck out for him on multiple occasions,
but
he
did
was
that
the
for
captain.
he did that for all of his crew and his better officers.
You'd think these two were like best buddies.
You think about the episode when everyone thought Data had been destroyed in that shuttle accident, when in reality he'd been kidnapped by the Collector.
Yes.
Right? Picard was like, okay, we did our investigation. He's gone. We need to move on.
Yeah.
Let's go. And everybody else was like, give us another day. We've got some other working theories. And Picard was like ready, like...
Geordi, he was a toaster. Take us out.
I mean, he was ready to move on. Look, we lose officers in the line of duty and, whatever. So it's not like they were Kirk and Spock,
Right.
But even so, Data episodes... I liked Geordi episodes.
Yeah, Geordi episodes.
I
like Geordi a lot, but like Geordi gets. Do you remember that one where he had that holodeck simulation of that scientist that he fell for?
Leah Brahms,
and then she finds it later, and she's like,
Was it good for you?
Nothing like that happened. It was a professional collaboration.
Oh, I can tell. Every time you're touching the engine, you're touching me. Real professional.
Look, if you watched the whole program, you saw what it was. We were working together to solve a problem in a crisis situation.
How do I know how far it went?
what have you been doing with this? Geordi is the incel of the USS Enterprise.
Oh, but he doesn't act like one.
No, it's the 24th century. We're beyond that sort of thing.
Yeah,
incels are a little different.
His thing is that he has trouble with women. That's what was great about this show. Everybody had something.
Yeah. Riker had women, and Geordi did not.
Well, but if you're going to use Riker as an example, I would mean like, we know he plays the trombone. We know that he likes to cook. We know that he plays poker.
And he takes it very seriously.
Every one of those characters has something that we know they're interested in outside of their job as a Starfleet officer. Data paints, right?
Yep. Has a cat.
Yeah, he's a cat owner, and he plays the violin, and Dr. Crusher can tap dance. I guess that's not her thing, but, she
does it in like one episode.
Yeah, she does it in one. She teaches Data how to tap dance.
That was in the one where he's going on that date, right?
That was the one where he needed to learn to dance for O'Brien's wedding.
That's right. And he does that run move, and he just kind of determined looking at the wall, like straightforward. Yeah.
But anyway, the point is they're very well rounded out characters. You know these people, and you know them well enough to know how they would act in certain situations.
You ever see the SNL Love Boat: The Next Generation sketch?
I think I did.
With Patrick Stewart
as
the ship's captain. And at the end, Data, portrayed by Rob Schneider, says, "Captain, I got this for you." And he hands him a Valentine. And Picard looks at it and says, "Data, this is a human heart." And he's like, "Yes, but it is dipped in milk chocolate." Oh, Mr. Data.
Yeah, Picard episodes too. Boy, Picard.
Picard got, pound for pound, the best episodes of this show. Like, consistently got the best episodes.
And I want to talk about Picard at some point. But you, I think, started this conversation with what my relationship to this episode was. And it's one that, I don't know if it's because of the repetition or just because I liked it this much, but it's an episode that I felt like I could come on here and do a podcast about without
having
even
watched
rewatching it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad I did, but I was the same way.
I definitely am too.
So many moments in this episode are just etched in my brain. The poker games.
Mm-hmm. The wine glass breaking. It's almost as though it's fated, right? We talked a little bit about what fate might look like on Star Trek last week. Right.
With the death of Edith Keeler.
Right.
In a scenario that could not have been how she, quote unquote, originally died, unless this was just how it always went down. But the fact that even when she pretty much avoids breaking the wine glass still ends up broken on the floor.
Right.
That sticks with you. It's like that little thing. It's like, oh, you kind of can't get out of some of this, right?
It was the eeriest feeling. When the glass broke, it triggered the sensation even more intensely than I'd done it all before.
Right, exactly. It was definitely a symbol to indicate inevitability.
Yes.
And part of me, for a little while, I was thinking, well, that doesn't work at all, because they do get out of it.
Well, you know that. You know that the whole time. But there still needs to be some underlying tension, right? Because obviously they get out of it.
For the character, it scares her enough to feel like
we may not be able to do anything about this.
Yeah, exactly. This is inevitable, and it's actually really effective that way.
Yeah.
Her trimming the plant as well.
Mm-hmm.
I like that moment when she's, her nightly activity was to trim her plants, right? And at one of these go-throughs, just picking up the pruning shears scared her.
Right. She's like, wait a minute.
She picked it up and then got that feeling of been through this again, and it freaked her out enough to put them back down.
Yeah.
That was a good moment. So basically, as they continue to live this moment in time over and over and over again, there are echoes of the past.
Some figurative and some literal.
Yeah. And they all start to feel like they've been through it. They're all dealing with severe cases of deja vu.
Yeah.
And like a shared deja vu.
And something I think this episode does really well is that even though each iteration of this loop lasts like a day and a half for them, probably.
If that. Yeah.
I mean, it's long enough for them to go to sleep and wake up in the morning.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Okay.
But even though there's a lot of time in there to play with, we keep seeing pretty much the same 3 or 4 events over and over and over again. Like
right.
the things we see in virtually every iteration are the poker game, Geordi's visit to sickbay, Crusher going to bed, the command crew meeting,
right,
and then the destruction of the Enterprise. And those 5 events we see every single time, so we can kind of chart the little changes to each loop. Each one kind of has this cool revelatory moment. The poker game, of course, when Crusher starts to call the cards. Right? Like, you're going to flip this and you're going to flip that. And I mentioned that Riker takes poker very seriously. When she does that, the look on his face is like, motherfucker.
A queen. You're going to give me a queen. And you're going to get a 4. 10. 7. Queen.
9. Jack. 4.
Deuce. 6.
This is highly improbable.
Like, he is about to throw her the fuck out of this game and never come back.
But then they start to do it too.
Yes.
And everybody can call the cards.
One of the cool things is Geordi's sickbay visit, because he's starting to get dizzy and experiencing some disorientation. Crusher asks him through a few iterations, have you ever experienced these symptoms before? And he says no. And then eventually he's like, I think I have.
But I don't remember when.
Yeah. And so it's just, it kind of slowly starts to set in. So you get a sense that once you've been through this enough, escape is virtually guaranteed eventually. Right? Because eventually, if you keep remembering more and more loop to loop, I mean, eventually you got to find your way out of it one way or the other. It doesn't have to be soon, as we see with the USS Bozeman. But the point of this episode isn't the fact that inevitably your crew is going to get out of this situation, because this is Star Trek. It's weekly television. Of course they're going to get out of it.
Right.
It's the mystery and the hook of what the hell is going on here.
Right.
What the hell is going on leads into, after maybe the second commercial break, how are we getting out of this? How are they going to break this cycle? What are they going to do to get out of this? And it's a real compelling hour of television.
It added temporal causality loop to my vocabulary.
In fact, I've got the Star Trek Encyclopedia.
Oh, look at you.
First edition here. And it's got the entry on temporal causality loop in here. A disruption in the space-time continuum in which a localized fragment of time is repeated over and over again ad infinitum. USS Bozeman, trapped in a causality loop in 2278, emerging 90 years later in 2368.
Now, were they caught in the loop for 90 years?
They were.
They weren't caught in the loop the same amount of time as the Enterprise?
No, because
they were definitely traveling from the past to the future.
Right. They entered a temporal rift.
Yeah.
That rift brought them to 2268, also known as Season 5.
Yeah.
And striking the Enterprise and the explosion of the Enterprise in proximity to that temporal distortion is what created the causality loop. So the Bozeman was only stuck in the loop because the Enterprise was stuck in the loop.
Right. That's why I assume they were stuck for the same amount of time.
Yeah.
17 days.
Well, I mean, no. For them, it was much longer because they also traveled forward in time.
But weren't they traveling forward in time anyway?
Yeah.
Was
yeah.
causing them to travel forward in time.
They definitely felt like it was a day or two. They felt the same experience that the Enterprise did.
Right. They were caught in it for the same amount of time.
That ship had been missing for 90 years, though, I think is the point.
Had they not collided, they were still going to travel 90 years into the future.
Correct.
So they were in the causality loop for the same amount of time. The fact that it's been 90 years is immaterial to the amount of time they were actually in the loop.
Hey, look. So this says...
Check the encyclopedia.
Let's see. Trapped in a temporal... Oh, it says they were trapped in a temporal causality loop and emerged 90 years later. It doesn't mean they were trapped in the causality loop for 90 years. They simply emerged from the loop 90 years later.
Right.
Yes.
That's what yeah. Okay.
Maybe we can get Michael Okuda on the show.
Yeah.
To explain himself. Because the Okudas know all this stuff.
Yeah.
They wrote the damn book.
They wrote the book on that ship.
I will tell you, I also have a copy right next to me of the Star Trek chronology.
Oh, wow.
This is also a first edition, so it literally only goes up to Season 5 of The Next Generation.
Oh, okay.
But the entry for this episode is a lot of fun because this is, an in-universe chronology of events. So what it says is that the USS Bozeman, a Soyuz-class Federation starship under the command of Captain Morgan Bateson, reported lost in 2278 near the Typhon Expanse, unexpectedly emerges from a rift in the space-time continuum, nearly colliding with the USS Enterprise. Compelling evidence suggests a collision between the two ships did in fact occur, in which the Bozeman impacted the Enterprise's starboard warp nacelle, resulting in the destruction of the Enterprise with loss of all hands.
All hands abandon ship! Repeat! All hands abandon...
And it goes on from there, but it
Yeah.
paints it as, we don't really know what happened. We know that the ship emerged and everything was fine.
Right.
So that's kind of fun.
Once you've avoided it and gotten out of the causality loop, there's no recollection or record of what you did to get out of it, really.
No, they can only piece it together. Like, Data at the end of this episode says, I must have sent myself a message from a previous loop, and then subconsciously made the number 3 recur on the ship.
Right, because having the number 3 recur on the ship changed what they were doing enough that they didn't have the same meeting where they discussed sending a message.
There are a lot of neat things in this episode that you pick up on a repeat viewing that you wouldn't have even thought about the first time through. Those are the kind of shows that are always fun, especially when it comes to time travel stuff. But the whole resolution of this episode being related to the number of rank insignia pips on Riker's collar.
Mm-hmm.
There are earlier takes of that scene where the Enterprise is destroyed, and Data looks over at Riker every single time. He didn't just happen to look over at Riker in that final iteration. It was like a part of the process that was happening.
Right.
So it's like Data knows, I am going to look over here, ergo, I am going to give myself this reminder, or this trigger, kind of.
Right. And, of course, the message 3 means instead of going with Data as one does...
Yeah, of course you go with the computer.
Right. That Data's course of action was not going to be correct, and instead they decompressed the main shuttle bay, as Riker had suggested, pushing them out of the way. Because, for whatever reason, the temporal distortion was also preventing the helm from responding.
Yeah, like everything shut down. Like
everything
systems
was
just kind
breaking,
of went dark.
Yeah.
Shields were down. As soon as it was over, everything came right back up.
Couldn't eject the core. Always trying to inject the warp core.
So, Geordi, have a better idea. Just once.
Come up with something else.
That dude's just trying to get a 3-day weekend. Like, no warp core. No engineering job.
I feel like that would make his job way worse.
He's going to spend his whole weekend on the internet looking at 4chan posts.
Oh, God.
I'm only kidding because LeVar Burton is the antithesis of all of that.
Well, also, this series best epitomizes the utopia that is the Federation. In my opinion, I feel like this is the show that really gives you the best feeling that all that shit is behind us.
Yes. I
you know what I mean?
Totally agree. Because, I mean, it's obviously not the original series.
My friend is obviously Chinese.
That was a product of the Cold War at its height.
Yeah.
Right? And there are a lot of episodes that relate directly to that, while finding that shared humanity. And again, I'm going back to one of my favorite episodes of that original run, Balance of Terror, right?
Right, yeah, you mentioned that last week.
There's this undercurrent of tension that is not fully resolved until Star Trek VI.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's not to say that the original series wasn't doing its part. I mean, just by virtue of having Ensign Chekhov on the show.
Yeah.
It was trying to portray that same utopia that I think is better fulfilled on TNG. You know, it was the 90s and not the 60s.
Yeah.
So we were just better prepared for that type of television. But this show was so hopeful.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before, I think, but Star Trek The Next Generation was a type of show that you could watch and say, hey, we could be that someday.
Yes. The biggest impact it had on me was that, you know, I was in middle school when I was really into this. Mm-hmm. And the friends I amassed over the years, it was a very diverse crowd of people. And I never thought twice about it. And I think a lot of it is just we were all kind of fans of this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know why you can't buck social norms or boundaries that have existed socially for decades. It never even occurred to me.
Right.
I grew up with this enterprise. And so this show and the utopian viewpoint and this we're all in it together and this is what we can achieve certainly had an impact on me.
Exactly. And I think it does go over some people's heads, you know, and they're just not seeing the forest through the trees, I guess. But it's a very progressive show. It's a very progressive outlook for society.
Wait until we get to DS9. I do have one small quibble with this episode in particular.
Oh, okay.
And that's the fact that as soon as the title card goes by, first thing you see is special guest star Kelsey Grammer as Captain Morgan Bateson. And I'm like,
spoilers.
God darn, did you have to I mean, I get that you had to do that. Kelsey Grammer is a big get. He's been playing Fraser Crane for like 10 years at this point. So he's a big name, a big get for this show. He's very recognizable. And his cameo is awesome.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
But like, God, it'd be so cool if we just didn't know Fraser was on that ship. It's like, oh man, they finally broke the curse. Oh my, it's Fraser. You know?
Right. Well, I don't always read the credits. You know?
I always read the credits.
Do you really?
And this might have been the show that really started the trend for me. Because you'd see like guest starring John Delancey and you're like, ooh, you know,
it's a Q episode.
But the thing that really did it is the X-Files. Because you'd be watching those opening credits and it would say guest starring William B. Davis. And you're like, fucking Smoking Man is in this episode. We're going to see some shit in here, you know? Like you start to see those like familiar names. John Neville is there. And the Syndicate's in this episode.
Right.
It's a nice little tease.
Yeah, now that you bring that up, though, Star Trek's one of the few shows that would put up the title of the episode.
Yeah, you don't get that anymore.
You don't get that anymore.
I feel like a lot of shows used to do that. Like, all of those original Star Trek series did it. DS9 did it. Voyager did it. It was a very 1960s thing. My favorite example of it is Police Squad. Okay. Because Police Squad would always be like, tonight's episode, dial M for murder or whatever. And then, like, the actual title card would say something like, The Butler did it. like the title that was read and the title that appeared on your screen were not the same title ever. But that was the send up of those old the cop shows and stuff like that would do that. Western shows did that a lot, where there would be like a title card for this episode is titled this or that. But again, it's one of those things as a society we kind of moved away from, I guess.
Maybe that was just Roddenberry keeping it alive or something. I mean, this is a series where if you gave me the title of an episode, it'd be a fun game to figure out if I knew which one that was.
Yes.
I know this series pretty well.
If I found a random episode of Star Trek, the original series, or The Next Generation just on, I would see how quickly I could figure out what episode it was.
Yep.
Yeah,
it doesn't take long.
Surprisingly.
If you see the Argus array, you know it's the nth degree.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. There's the Argus array. They're opening an episode with a game of poker.
There's only so many episodes that could be. And if Isaac Newton is sitting at the table,
yep,
then it's Descent Part 1.
You said you had a slight quibble with this. My quibble with this episode is this poker game.
Okay.
This is about the sorriest poker game I've ever seen in my life.
It definitely lacks the energy and dynamism of some of those later Command Crew poker games. Like, where's Troy?
Well, Troy wasn't there. Geordi wasn't there.
Geordi was in engineering, like, falling the fuck over and shit. We know that.
Yeah, it's a long way down to the bottom of the warp core.
I was lucky Ensign Fletcher was there to grab me.
But yeah, I mean, what is Crusher doing down betting 3rd Street? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the bet of the prior set was already at 50, and she's going to open the bet in the next round at 20?
That doesn't make it.
Who's going away at 20?
Yeah.
Crusher? I mean, come on.
You're 20 and 50 more.
50?
I'm in.
I will also see the bet. 8. 9 for the dealer.
It's absurd. Absolutely absurd.
Absurd poker play.
But you know what is also absurd is that Riker is just throwing that Command Crew money around like it's nobody's business. Like, this guy, he's obviously like the second highest paid person on the ship, and he's letting everybody know it. Like, you cannot beat me because I simply have more money than you.
Well, he constantly makes illegal bets. Every one of his bets is a string bet. You can't announce a call and then raise it.
You're 20 and 50 more.
50?
I don't think Brennan Braga knew the rules of poker.
24th century poker. It's like 3D chess.
Yeah, it's just those stupid silver chips. Plus, they don't get paid, so it's all meaningless anyway.
That's true.
They're not gambling anything because there is no money.
Oh man, what could they be gambling?
It's just fun for the chips, like when you play with M&Ms or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
sounds like a blast.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I totally get what you mean.
I am a big fan of poker.
Yeah, you can't techno-babble away like a game of poker. Like, you can come up with all sorts of terminology to explain what's going on elsewhere in this episode, but poker is poker. And there are certain things about this that don't hold up under scrutiny.
Yes, exactly. If Riker is supposed to be that much of a poker player, it's not there in the script, is what I'm saying. Also, there's that really awkward shot of somebody else's hands painted white dealing the cards. It's like a close-up on somebody's hands doing the shuffling at super speed for Data. But it's like clearly not Brent Spiner's hands.
Right.
For all my jokes, I do really enjoy scenes like that one where it is just them off the job.
Yes.
And it's a real joy to see Data like dealing the cards the way that he is.
Jack, no help for the Klingon,
No help to the Klingon. That's right. And Worf's reaction to Data each time he deals him a card is just classic.
He's not having any of it.
Watch your mouth, robot.
Oh, there's another one. Yeah, I did like Worf episodes a lot.
Yeah, some of them were really good.
A lot of the Klingon mythology episodes that we got into there about the culture and the way of living and how he was kind of going against the grain. Like, that kind of stuff I always like.
Worf became a better character once he had a ponytail.
Oh, sure. Certainly. Yeah. It's
somehow the ponytail did it.
Him and Riker got the beard and he became better.
Yeah. Any of these, what they do in their spare time, kinds of things. Like, that stuff was always super interesting to me. That's why that episode Lower Decks is so fun.
Yeah.
Centers around 4 officers, ensigns, and junior lieutenants.
Yeah, just 4 nobodies.
Yeah, and they're up for promotion or something. And it's just day in the life kind of thing.
Yeah. That's
a really great episode, too. But I feel like we're talking about every episode except the one that we'd said we would discuss.
So we we mentioned that Crusher hears some voices in her quarters in this episode, and it takes a couple of go-throughs before she has the wherewithal to record it.
Right, because she's ready for it.
She's finally ready for it, and then she passes it along to Data. Data kind of parses it all out.
Oh, that was a great scene.
It's terrific. It's terrific. The voices are all 1,000 approximately members of the Enterprise crew simultaneously.
Talking over one another.
I love, because it's all from a single moment, right?
Yeah.
And I love when he's trying to explain, like...
I've analyzed the recording Dr. Crusher made. Most of it is quite ordinary. 150 discussions about ship operations. 252 conversations of a personal nature. 5 couples engaged in romantic encounters.
Your point, Mr. Data.
Yeah.
And at that point, Picard's like, Data.
Get to your point.
Yeah, get to the point, will you?
Yeah, exactly. What I think is so fun about that is when they're trying to puzzle out this thing, and they've got the recording and they're trying to play it back. And first he has the computer isolate only vocal patterns.
Yes.
So it filters out all the background noise, essentially. And then Crusher is like, can we filter out the voices? Can we split them up? And instead of doing that, Data just takes a second and starts listening intently to thousands of voices all at once. And Brent Spiner, God love him, does his little cock the head robot
man, I love
look that he does, you know, Data concentrating, and he does that little, he just turns his head slightly because his brain is processing. He's so good at it. I'm sure it got boring over the course of 7 years, but he's so fun, and he is able to isolate just with his ear the voices and know that it's 1,000 different voices all at once. That was a really fun
And then he
scene.
draws out a few critical moments from the recording.
Yeah, exactly. The ones that are pertinent to helping solve the mystery.
Yeah.
Core shutdown is unsuccessful. We are losing antimatter containment.
We've got to eject the core!
Ejection systems offline. Core breach is imminent. All hands abandon ship! Repeat! All hands abandon...
It's fun because this is a time travel episode that doesn't involve some kind of alternate future or some kind of ruined past.
Oh, God, so many of them do, right? Even last week's, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's what a time travel show almost is. How do you write a time travel episode without doing something that has messed up the time stream and fixing it back?
That's what's wonderful about this season in particular. Because the other time travel episodes in Season 5 of Star Trek The Next Generation are A Matter of Time and Time's Arrow. Do you remember A Matter of Time?
Yes.
Where a character portrayed by Matt Frewer shows up in a time machine.
Yes.
Claiming to come from the future when in fact we find out that he's a thief who stole a time machine.
Right. Of somebody else that was a time traveler. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Time's Arrow, of course, which opens with one of the great teasers of all of Star Trek when they find Data's head buried under San Francisco.
Yeah.
What a great...
That's a fantastic stinger at the beginning, right? Is the stinger of this episode good?
The explosions?
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people think that it is, and that it's one of the better ones, but part of me wonders, do you really want to give that away right away?
Given what this episode is about and given what it does, I sort of can't think of a better way to open it, because it opens with the nacelle exploding. We don't see the Bozeman. We don't know what the hell's going on. And before we can even think about it, the Enterprise explodes.
Yeah.
I defy anybody to not hang around to watch this episode after seeing that. You see that?
Yeah.
It's like, whoa. I gotta watch
nobody's
this
going anywhere, but also the next thing that you see is the Enterprise flying along.
Right, and then you're like, what the hell is this? I don't know. I think it does a great job because, yes, it's a time travel episode, but it's a mystery episode. You know, what they're really trying to do is solve a mystery. And just like Columbo, we've seen how this shit ends up. Now we got to figure out how we got to that point.
Okay.
We've got to piece together the clues, right?
Sure.
This episode feels like it's predominantly a mystery that we're waiting on the crew to solve. 10 minutes in, we've seen the whole sequence play out. Right? And now we're just like, how are they going to put this together? How are they going to get out of this one? Right. I think it's just super effective, and I think it starts with that teaser, honestly.
Okay. All right. Good argument.
This is the kind of thing that I think if it came up in the writer's room, if Braga just handed in the script, the producers and Paramount would look at it and be like, this is mint. This is the kind of intro you pray for. I don't know. It's just like so...
All right.
It is so engaging. The frenetic pace of it, and it just like drops you in, the ship explodes. This tease itself is like less than a minute long. Right? You went to the bathroom, you grabbed a drink, you were just fucking sitting down, you missed the first 3 seconds of the episode, and you're like, holy living... What is going on here?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, a lot of stingers for this series are almost entirely independent of the episode.
Yeah.
It would be like a little vignette story and then the credits, and then your actual episode began after the credits. Sometimes it called back, sometimes it was unrelated altogether.
A lot of times somebody's visiting the ship, like a dignitary's beaming aboard or something like that, or they're en route to something and something else happens there to kind of, ratchet up the tension a little bit. But I mean, like, I can't think of an intro scene that had a higher tension level than this.
Well, I like your example of Time Zero. That was a good one.
Time Zero has a great one. You know what else has a really good one? Best of Both Worlds Part 1.
Oh, yeah, the Borg footprint.
They see, yes, the Borg footprint.
Oh, well, that's after the teaser.
Okay,
but
yeah. But that, like...
They beam down to it, and there's a big gaping hole where there's supposed to be a base station.
But, I mean, in a show that really made that opening tease like a masterclass almost, you know? Because that's another thing a lot of shows weren't really doing at the time, I don't think. Most of the shows on TV in the 80s that I remember watching just started with the theme song and then went into the episode. This idea of pre-show entertainment was not so much a thing. I feel like Next Generation was a standard bearer there. Just like the season finale cliffhanger was something that I was unfamiliar with, at least.
I think Best of Both Worlds was the first one that I remember happening. What do you mean the answers are not next week? What do you mean we gotta wait all summer?
Riker just told the Enterprise to open fire on Picard.
On Captain Picard, yeah.
And that's where we're ending it. Boy, oh boy.
Yeah. Storytelling on the Next Generation is, like I think you alluded to earlier in the prior week, it really got going around that third season because they were so caught up in not having conflict amongst the crew that it was making things very difficult for writers to come up with storylines if you can't have any friction. But, you know, like there's no room for drama if the characters are supposed to avoid drama in this utopia. So, like, apparently you have to reach the rank of admiral before you can actually be... duplicitous.
A problem. Or get a head parasite.
Yeah, that's right.
But so going back to Morgan Bateson here, the only little bit of trivia I have about this episode is that Kelsey Grammer did not have to audition for this role. They just handed it to him because he is a Star Trek fan.
Right.
Cheers was filming at the adjacent soundstage. So it was just a matter of like, hey, Frasier, you busy?
Well, it's not exactly an inspired cameo. I mean, I guess he's just trying to play it matter of fact.
He's just trying to be stoic. You know, he's trying to be the stoic
captain.
The
captain of the ship.
I mean, to be fair, that's exactly how he should have played that. He's not harried by this. He's just thinking, hi, yes, I'm a starship captain, and I am in control here. And Picard's like, actually, Captain, you haven't been in control for 90 years, you know? But, I mean, he plays it exactly like you should, even if it's a little, dry.
Yeah, it's dry. But the bit of trivia that I have, which I thought you were going to go into, obviously the ship model that they use.
Yes, of course.
Is the reused USS Reliant from Star Trek II.
Star Trek II, yeah.
They made some minor adjustments to it, but it's obviously the model.
I think would they add some shit on top, or did they take some shit off?
They took some stuff off and
There's
replaced
like a
it
sensor
a little
array
bit.
on top or something, and they
instead of that roll bar basically that was holding the nacelles on, they take that off. Trivia within the trivia, the Reliant was designed to fly the other way. They accidentally filmed it upside down first. And then they decided they really liked that.
I got to agree with them. I think it looks a lot better that way.
Yeah, it looks really, with the nacelles underneath. Huh. But, a little bit of trivia.
If that original design had been used and then adapted into the Soyuz class, do you think that it would have hit the Enterprise nacelle? I don't think it would have.
But going back to my original bit of trivia, not only was that the model that was used for the USS Reliant, the initial plan was to have it be a Constitution-class starship that was the same model as the USS Enterprise from the original series. But they didn't have the time or budget to build a new model, and they didn't have any old ones on hand. So it was a budgetary change to use a model that they already had on hand. But it seems to me that as effective as this episode is, fans remember this episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that if this episode was the USS Enterprise running into essentially the USS Enterprise, that would have been freaking huge.
That would have been big. Yeah, although they did already do that with yesterday's Enterprise.
That wasn't the same Enterprise.
It wasn't the same Enterprise, but it was the same idea, I guess.
Well, but if it was the actual same ship as Kirk's Enterprise, I think that would have blown up. Like,
yeah,
I feel like that would have been huge. And they weren't able to do that, but their plan B was to try and get Kirstie Alley to reprise her role as Saavik.
From Star Trek
and
2. Yeah.
She couldn't do it due to scheduling.
Which is funny, because the
Cheers films right over there.
They got Frasier. You couldn't get her.
They got Frasier. They couldn't get Kirstie Alley. But that would have been pretty crazy, too. Except if they did that, they'd have to do something with those characters.
They would have
She couldn't just be standing there behind him, right?
We're not going to address this? Are we not going to address
exactly.
this?
We're not going to see these people. That, clearly they'd have to have some kind of conversation to,
They also would have had to alter the timeline a little bit, because the Bozeman entered that time rift before Star Trek II happened.
Oh, did it?
Yes.
Well, I mean, they could make it any year.
Yeah, you could
really.
You could technically make it any year. You don't have to worry about that. But
especially since they wore those red uniforms all the way up into Picard's Academy days.
Oh man,
they wore those red uniforms a long time.
Twitter would have been just on fire after that episode if they had said, "Yes, we've been in here since 2278," and Saavik was behind him. They destroyed the timeline. They ruined Star Trek this week because Kirstie Alley was here.
Yeah, the internet would have been ablaze with toxic fandom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a fun little trivia tidbit about this episode.
The other thing that I would mention, the technobabble is off the charts in this episode.
God, yeah. Dekion field emission.
And now, is a Dekion field a thing?
Look, here's the thing with Star Trek. Not only are they expecting us not to know whether that's a thing, they're also expecting us not to bother to look it up.
Yeah, neutrinos are a thing.
Oh, neutrinos are a thing.
I always remember Wesley Crusher's neutrinos are drifting.
Hi.
Hi. Your neutrinos are drifting.
For what?
When Ashley Judd tells Wesley Crusher his neutrinos are drifting.
Yeah.
Yeah, gold. Nanites are a thing. I remember when nanites came out. Tachyon emissions are tachyons things?
You know what the thing that always blew my mind is the Dyson sphere.
The Dyson sphere.
That's
was
a
cool.
thing. The Dyson sphere is a real thing, or a real conceptual thing.
A real conceptual thing. Yeah. As far as this particular episode, though, what did you say it was called? A what field?
Dekion field emission. That's the sort of quote unquote message in a bottle that Data sends from one loop to the next.
I would be curious to know whether a dekion is a thing. It's just this amorphous term. What would actually cause an echo in time in this kind of time distortion?
I will tell you one thing. Everything that I see about it in a quick Google search is from Memory Alpha, a Star Trek wiki, and the Daystrom Institute Technical Library. So I'm going to say no.
It sounds like a Star Trek thing.
Sounds like they made it up for Star Trek. And that's okay.
Well, good for them. Like I said, technobabble, off the chart.
Hey, all you got to do is sound like you know what you're talking about. Let's face it.
Yeah. And why not? It gives you the opportunity to determine the resolution. Like, how do you actually send a message?
Dekion field emission.
A Dekion field emission within Data's positronic brain to subconsciously force him to create the number 3 randomly throughout the Enterprise.
And how many times does he do that?
It says, doesn't it?
It does. There were 2,085 conspicuous examples of the number 3 embedded in the Enterprise via the poker game, ship scans.
When he starts dealing out the 3s,
yeah,
they all get 3s, and then they all get 3 of a kind.
3 of a kind? Yeah, that's cool.
That was super neat. Because at the time, I mean, yes, he glances up at Riker, but you don't really see it. I don't feel like you really see it.
No.
He just kind of types the message into the little thing on his armband.
Yeah,
that
he
they
just
put
looks
on
down.
There. So we don't know what the 3 means.
Right. Data is just hoping that he can make sense of it in the next loop.
Right. Not only do they not know, but the audience doesn't know.
What is it? I don't know.
Like, what do you mean 3? Why is it all of a sudden 3? What is he trying to do?
That's it. Like, it's a mystery,
Yeah.
you know, and we know what's going on with them before they do.
Right.
But they start to figure out a way to fix it before we can suss out exactly how they're going to do it. You know, it's this really nice narrative trade-off. Like dramatic irony versus reversing that, and now suddenly we know a little bit less.
Right.
That anticipation's always there for us. The sense of, we know what's going on, but how are they going to get out of it?
And
that keeps us
on
guessing.
A repeat viewing, I'm wondering if I am only able to watch it now knowing what the 3 meant. And I can't remember how I felt when maybe I didn't know what the 3 meant.
Okay.
Did we always know? Like, when you looked up, did you immediately know that he was referring to Riker's pips? I don't think I did.
Well, he tells us, you know, he does explain it to us pretty directly there at the end.
At the end.
Yeah,
at the end. But, like, when the 3s come up in the poker game, because that's the first time you see it.
Oh, no.
And he deals out 3s.
We're just sitting there seeing all the 3s.
You're like,
what are the 3s? What's 3 got to do with...
What's going on?
Data, what does 3 have to do with fucking anything?
Yeah, right. And then...
You had one shot, Data. 3?
Maybe we should run a level 3 diagnostic.
Yeah.
You know, that was a good theory, and he's playing with the console down in engineering and runs all those 3s across the screen.
He could have had so much fun with this.
The thing about solving the mystery, too, the sheer number of times you're in that conference room over the course of this series, I mean, they have meetings in there a lot. They're often for exposition dumps.
Yep.
But it's also a lot of really good storytelling going on in there. And the thing that I love about this show the most, and one of the things that I really wanted to touch on, and luckily this episode has some of the best example of it, is Captain Picard and his method of leadership. Like we've said, he's very inspiring. He's definitely my captain in that whole Kirk versus Picard argument that used to be a thing. But the thing that I find so powerful about Jean-Luc Picard and Patrick Stewart's portrayal of him is the captain doesn't have to have all the answers all the time. I've got a crew of the best people. I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah. That's how a leader leads.
Exactly. In my life, I've been in positions of leadership just through my professional life, you know, positions of management, you know, team captains, this kind of thing.
Yeah, and in my life, I've been in a temporal causality loop. No, it just feels that way. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay.
That's what the daily grind feels like.
It can. It definitely can. But when I have taken promotions, there's a tendency to want to feel like, okay, well, now since I'm in charge, I have to have all the answers. And you don't.
Yeah.
All you have to do is be able to choose the best answer of the things that are presented to you and not feel emasculated by somebody else having the better idea. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, like, if you've got employees that work for you and there's a problem in front of us, well, what do you guys think that we should do? Let's discuss it. And then it's your responsibility as the leader to make the final decision based on the information that's presented to you. And it doesn't mean that you have to come up with the idea. And that's what Picard exemplifies to me in more than just this episode. But it's a good example of it here.
Yeah.
The other thing that I really like is that he allows Riker to give commands while he's on deck.
Yes.
Riker, as a first officer, can call out an order and expect that it be followed, and Picard trusts him to do that. You know what I mean?
It's the subtle things. It's the subtle things, yeah.
Yeah.
This is showing you how a leadership structure is supposed to function in a healthy way.
Yeah.
A productive way.
That's right. That's right. And I'm trying to look back at like DS9 and maybe Voyager, where they have similar dynamics there, and I don't feel like it was the same.
Well, I mean, those two had very complicated dynamics too.
Yeah.
It's like DS9.
Other dynamics.
DS9,
sure.
It was just a hodgepodge of different people with different beliefs in basically like a interstellar mall.
Yeah.
And then Voyager, of course, you know, half the crew was a goddamn terrorist cell. So like,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
There's a lot of different dynamics at play there.
Right.
This is kind of the purest form of it because everybody on the Enterprise is there by design because this is their assignment. Especially on Voyager, that is absolutely not the case, right?
Right. Yeah.
But that's part of what makes those ensembles work in a different way. It makes this whole train keep going.
Right. And one more thing about Picard is I love the fact that he's intellectual.
Yeah.
Kirk's not stupid or what have you, but like it almost seems strange that it's okay for Picard to be reading a book. Like that in his downtime he reads books.
Yes. There's something that's very 17th century sailing captain about that. You know, there's something very classical about Picard's approach to captaining a ship.
Yeah.
And I think there is something inherently masculine about that from that perspective.
Right.
Like, we accept Picard as a guy who, reads classic literature and listens to classical music because there is this mythology built around ship captains who did things like that.
Okay,
like, I feel like Kirk, while he is a very capable leader and he's got a crew that he respects, I feel like that coy brashness...
He's a cowboy.
It's very much a product of its time, both in terms of the media landscape. You say cowboy, that's what was popular, you know?
Yeah. Wagon train to the stars.
But also the kind of glorification of the American military in this sort of like attaboy, go get 'em kind of post-World War II vibe that we were still riding right up until the time that Star Trek debuted, right? When Vietnam was kind of in full effect. But, you know, I'm just kind of speculating there that Kirk was kind of representing a more immediate version of the idealized captain, whereas Picard is kind of taking a step back and looking to this more classical version of this sailing captain who was just stoic and unflappable, right?
I mean, he's an archaeologist. He's a philosopher. Right. You know, he reads Shakespeare. And, like, the scene in this episode when Dr. Crusher, she can't sleep because she's heard the voices, she did the recording, and she wants to talk to the captain about what she has experienced. And that's in a professional sense. She wants to bring it to her captain's attention.
Crusher to Picard.
Yes, Doctor.
Do you have a minute, Jean-Luc?
But by virtue of the relationship that the two of them have, it's just a meeting in his ready room, and he, like, gets her tea and milk.
Right.
And sits down and has a thoughtful conversation about what she must be dealing with right now and taking it very seriously.
My Aunt Adele cured a lot of sleepless nights with this steamed milk.
Thank you. Nutmeg.
Whenever I get insomnia, I try to perfect the recipe.
Even when the situations seem kooky, but there's no sensor data to back up anything that's happening, Picard leads with curiosity. He's giving everybody around him the benefit of the doubt. Crusher's not nuts. Something is going on here, and we have to figure out what it is.
He does have that look on his face the first time she says something that's kind of like, well, all right, Beverly. But you're right. Nobody was just going to outright blow it off, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we're going to give everybody their due. We know Beverly Crusher well enough. We've worked with her long enough to know that she's not crazy. So, let's at least look into this. And, of course, she finds some evidence of her own in Geordi's visor and eventually backs up her story. But I just enjoy the fact that Picard is so willing to listen, take in all the information, and then make an educated decision. And then also be a complete and total badass when he's facing down the Duras sisters.
This is not your world, human. You do not command here.
I'm not here to command.
Then you must be ready to fight. Something Starfleet does not teach you.
You may test that assumption at your convenience.
Which has become the internet meme for fuck around and find out.
Exactly.
But so he's like a best of both worlds, no pun intended. And then next week's episode, you bring in a Benjamin Sisko who's got a whole other different style.
Sisko's a totally different commander.
Totally different captain.
Yeah.
And you end up saying, well, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah. A nice little bit of continuity that I liked about the Picard scenes, too, is that the first time Crusher comes to his ready room, there's a glass of bourbon sitting on the table behind him. And this is after he's gotten Beverly her mug, and she's got her drink there.
Her tea and milk.
And then in a later iteration of the loop, you see him pour that drink. And I was like, that's kind of cool. Because I'm looking at that. Like, I'm looking like, oh, what's he drinking? Or where did that drink come from? And then 20 minutes later, it's like, oh, this is an earlier part of this same scene. And he's sitting down to relax and he's pouring himself a drink. And it's like a nice little bit of continuity in there.
Yeah.
Or implied continuity.
Captain Picard is a little bit like my dad.
Oh, okay.
In that he can speak intelligently on just about every topic, and something that you have no idea that he knew anything about, he can somehow hold a conversation, not as though he were an expert, but he could speak intelligently on the topic.
Yeah.
And it's like the great thing about the way Picard is written, or maybe it's the way Patrick Stewart plays the character, but anytime something comes out of Picard that you're like, oh, I didn't know that he knew that about. It never feels like the convenience of a script. Like, oh, well, we need Picard to also like this.
No, I mean, he's a legitimate Renaissance man.
Yeah, and you have no trouble believing that he knows what a good brandy tastes like.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like when Scotty is
like,
trying to drink
takes
actual
a
alcohol.
Swig of that drink. Aldebaran whiskey.
Yeah, exactly. Aldebaran whiskey, yeah. And, of course, he knows what that is. I mean, he's never mentioned it before, but, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a much better way than even Sam Beckett, who knows everything. You know? For Sam Beckett, it's almost a joke that he's like a Superman that knows way too much. But for Picard, he's so unflappable.
Yeah.
Because he's seen so much. And knows so much and has educated himself about so many things. But anyway.
I mean, he's got a starship maneuver named after him. This guy's been around.
Yeah. Also the term used for straightening your uniform. The Picard maneuver.
Yeah, that's right.
Pull your uniform down.
The lower tug.
The lower tug of the shirt.
It's you mentioned that. It's like Riker, the way he sits and throws his leg over chairs and stuff.
Yeah.
Everybody's got their little quirks, man. Like Data with the head ticking, it's just. Every time we watch this show, every time I come back to an episode, it's like, this feels like coming home.
Yeah.
Like I know these guys. He just did the leg thing again,
Yeah, or the way Worf can huff and shake his head.
that look,
just about
the
everything.
look that he shoots, the eyes,
I love that.
It's like
I love that at the poker game.
It's always like the Klingons about to come out.
Yeah,
he's like, well, if I weren't so civilized, you know?
The thing about his Klingon, though, man, I mean, we could just go on forever about this show.
Probably,
but like the thing about Worf's character that I find so fascinating is that he is very much a Klingon that was raised by humans.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
the Webster of Klingons.
Clear as day that he understands his culture only by having studied it, not by having lived it. Because I remember a scene when he was having a conversation with Guinan, and he's like, Klingons do not laugh. Even I was like, are you kidding? Like, Klingons are constantly laughing and fighting and loud and raucous, and he's so stoic and like angry, like
everything he knows he read in a book.
Lot, yeah, and like he knows it forwards and backwards, but his idea of what it means to be a Klingon is so different from every example of Klingon that we've ever had on that show.
Yeah,
like Gowron, Chancellor Gowron.
I was just thinking about him. Yeah,
they'll turn on the stoicism when it comes to a matter of honor or what have you, but I mean, there's downtime when it comes to Klingons, you know?
Yeah.
And never with Worf.
Yeah.
You know that much about him just by the way that Michael Dorn portrays him. I love it. Love this show.
So where do you think this episode would kind of rank for you? And we talked about City on the Edge of Forever last week is pretty much, it always ends up in like the top 2 or 3 of an original series list. I don't know if Cause and Effect makes it into the top 5.
No.
But it's probably pretty high for me. There were like, 170 some episodes of the show? 172 episodes maybe?
I mean, you'd really have to sit down and really think about it. But clearly it's on the tip of our tongues enough that it's come up several times just in conversations about other topics.
This show had a lot of time travel episodes, and I do think that this ends up being one of the most memorable because of the execution, because of the novelty of how time travel is treated in this episode.
Yeah, you have less that you have to remember because it's pretty much a very short string of events.
Yeah.
And they change slightly each time, but you get the story several times, so it definitely sticks in your mind without being bland, I should say.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Made a little bit of joke about Jonathan Frakes' direction earlier in the episode, but I think he knocked this one out of the park.
Oh, for sure.
Because it could be really boring, you know?
For sure. And a lot of what makes this episode as good as it is are the subtle changes in the performances as the timeline progresses on and on and on, as the loops continue. Because each time Crusher is a little different and Riker is a little different, and it's just very, very tiny changes to their performance.
Yeah. And even some of the repeated scenes are framed differently.
Yes.
Like the poker game, and you can see the same events playing out, but shot from another angle just to kind of keep it fresh. He did a good job. I wonder if this is the first one he directed, maybe?
Ooh, man, I don't know.
But he did a really good job, and as we mentioned before in that great Clock Stoppers episode, he is now a prolific director in the realm of television.
Sweet dreams, Mr. Second Chance Man. Had fun.
Yeah, and a lot of Star Trek.
Yeah, definitely a lot of Star Trek. I think he's the one character that's been on the most iterations of Star Trek.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Speaking of which, after our discussion last week, I did jump on the YouTube and at least look at The Guardian of Forever on Disco.
Okay.
I hate it.
He was played by the police captain from CSI.
Yeah. He sure was.
This was the 4th episode of the show that Jonathan Frakes directed.
Oh, okay. So he had a few under his belt.
Out of a total of, I think, 8 episodes. If we ever get to Disco, we should count that Guardian of Forever as a separate Guardian of Forever.
Definitely. I mean, like, at what point did we ever indicate that the Guardian could manifest itself as a humanoid?
You know, when I was sitting there watching that, I was like, oh, this must be a cue.
Right.
You know?
And then he opens his mouth and sounds like the Guardian of Forever from the just for you audience.
Yep. That's what it was
it's
for.
Like, God damn, I hated it. I hated it. I mean, to be fair, it was very fresh in my mind. We had just watched it, and I had just edited a podcast conversation about that episode. But
God
when
damn
I
it.
went, yeah, I know. When I went and watched the clip of it, though, the Guardian was kind of inserting itself into the activities of the timeline.
Right.
You know, Michelle Yeoh's character was being given another chance to see if she can do this or that. I don't know the story, but I know that the Guardian doesn't do that. Everything we know about the Guardian was that he'd been there forever and that he was programmed to offer the history in this fashion and could not change it.
Right. I mean, he was just a rock formation. What is he supposed to do?
Was he machine or being? But, I mean, he specifically tells Kirk and Spock that he can't present the past to them in any other fashion.
Sure.
This is how I was designed to do it. And Discovery, he's just like changing history all by himself because he wants to and can just move around, and he's a humanoid, and I hate it. I hate it. Sorry, folks. Gatekeeper again. I apologize.
If you're going to build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
So let's talk about the time travel method in this episode.
I think we've gotten on a rhythm of expecting to rank machines.
Yeah, this is more of a ranking of a cosmic mishap.
Yeah. It makes me want to reframe the way that we ranked Loki's time slipping.
Oh, I see.
Not every time travel story is going to have a time machine.
Right.
Right? So
this is more the conceit of what's happening, right? It's the time loop itself, really a causality loop.
Right. The concept of a temporal causality loop. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's a great idea. Like,
I mean, it's Groundhog Day. Did this come out before Groundhog Day?
Man, Groundhog Day was what, 1991?
So it's probably piggybacking
93.
off
This definitely beat Groundhog Day.
No kidding. Okay. I kind of thought maybe they were trying to ride the coattails of a popular movie at the time, the way Sliders used to do.
Right. No, I mean, that's Trek is above that. At least at this point it was. So yeah, I think the causality loop as a concept is very, very cool.
Yeah.
Pro is that it's a really neat idea. Con is that you basically die in flames over and over and over again.
Over and over again.
See, now I have to start asking questions about what's above what. What is directly above the clock that went backwards?
Your clock does not go. Does it ever go?
Loki's time slipping is better than the clock that went backwards.
Okay, this is better than Loki's time slipping.
Definitely. Better than Looper?
Ooh.
Because the TVA time door is apparently better than Looper.
Oh, it looks cooler.
It doesn't matter!
Well, this is... Conceptually, I think this is cooler than both of those.
I was ready to put this... I was ready to put this above Midnight in Paris.
Wow.
I mean, as a concept, the temporal causality loop, I mean, it's been in my...
I mean, it really is a definitive time travel concept.
And when I saw it on Star Trek, it was forever on my lips.
Yeah, I've never stopped thinking about it since this episode. Yeah, all right. Yeah, I could see that. So that would put it above Midnight in Paris and below what? The Guardian of Forever?
Time Cop.
Oh, Time Cop. Okay, so Time Cop is still there.
I don't know. Better than Time Cop?
Oh, this is a slippery slope, isn't it?
I mean, Time Cop's up there because that machine is so cool.
The machine itself is very cool.
And the way that it looks and the idea that it's like piercing time. It's really cool. Is the temporal causality loop idea cooler?
I'm going to say yes. And the reason I'm going to say yes is because we leave this episode of Star Trek with a full understanding of what just happened and why.
Yeah.
I still have questions about how Time Cop's time travel works. Like, why are you driven there and then you have to walk back? Being chief among them.
Yeah, it would definitely be better if it was more like, and we didn't rank this, but more like Bishop's time travel, where he removes the armband.
Yeah, it's just an armband.
Just gets pulled back. Like, that's what Time Cop should have done. But instead, they, like, push little buttons and then walk into a field and disappear or something like that.
Yeah. It's like they wanted something as cool as the DeLorean.
Yeah.
And then they forgot how to get them back from there.
Yeah.
Like, it only takes you one way, really.
Okay, temporal causality loop is better than Time Cop.
I would say so, yeah.
But below the Guardian at the City of
Below the Guardian.
Yeah. All right.
Because, I mean, the Guardian's still like a wisecracking, smart-talking son of a bitch.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
Attitude alone elevates the Guardian.
That makes the temporal causality loop number 3, which is really just number 2 since the DeLorean is kind of a ringer.
Yeah. I mean, well,
I feel like the
DeLorean is number 1 on the list.
Yeah,
what else,
it should.
What else could ever possibly? I don't know. Maybe something will beat it eventually.
Maybe something, but all right. Temporal causality loop, putting it down.
All right. So next week, folks, we jump ahead a couple years on the timeline to an episode or 2, in fact, of Deep Space Nine. And we said, I don't know, didn't we say like last week that some of these episodes aren't going to be the ones that you necessarily expect them to be?
Yeah, I think this is an example. I don't think anybody expected that this would be what we would cover for TNG.
Okay, that's fair.
Cause and effect.
But
I mean, when you've got Time Zero and
all good things.
All Good Things is a time travel episode. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we could do for TNG, and we chose Cause and Effect.
Yeah.
Where they don't really go anywhere. As far as time travel is concerned.
They don't go anywhere, let alone boldly. But I think it's not going to be the most obvious episode of DS9.
Well, let me ask you this. What do you think is the most obvious episode?
Trials and Tribulations.
Yeah.
Would be the most obvious
Sorry,
episode.
Folks.
We're not doing that one, guys. The episode we are doing, we're doing for a very specific reason.
Yeah.
So we'll have that next time. But until then, guys, thanks for listening. As always, hey, why don't you send us an email? Some of you are doing this readily at this point, and I appreciate it. Send us an email at ohboyqlpod@gmail.com. I don't know, you got anything you want to say about the types of mail we want to solicit right now?
Well, if you look at the episode description on your podcast app, I did send us a haiku.
Okay, all right.
At ohboyqlpod@gmail.com.
Yeah, keep them coming. We're going to get back to the haikus in a couple of episodes. Probably once we're past Star Trek month here, we'll kick back into the haiku.
Look, we're going to spend a little bit of time trying to make this a thing. If it doesn't become a thing...
A haiku podcast?
It doesn't become a thing. Like every couple of episodes or something, we have a segment on it. It feels like it would be fun.
I like that.
But
I like that.
If it doesn't become a thing, it doesn't become a thing. That's fine. But we're going to try it for a couple of weeks, see if we can't get this thing going.
Speaking of things... leave us a review on your preferred podcast app, guys. Wherever you're listening, if you can, review us. Social media. Yeah, we're both on it. I am Brian.Lee.Martin on Threads and Instagram.
And I am at ActionNate on Blue Sky and Threads. Although the Blue Sky thing...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Blue Sky's a thing anymore.
Is it taken off for anybody?
I don't think so. I don't know. Threads, for me, Threads is where it's at. It's like, that's where I'm going now. I'm just...
Yeah.
Heading over there.
Well, I'm there too. So.
Very good. Find us there, folks. And until next time, I'm Brian.
And I'm Nate.
And we'll see you in the future.
Captain, we're being hailed by the other vessel. Computer identifies it as a USS Bozeman, a Federation starship. Soyuz class.
Soyuz class? They haven't been in service in over 80 years.
Open a channel.
This is Captain Morgan Bateson of the Federation starship Bozeman. Can we render assistance?
I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation starship Enterprise. We were just going to ask you the same thing.
Captain Picard, your vessel is not familiar to us.
Captain, have you any idea what has just happened?
Our sensors detected a temporal distortion. Then your ship appeared. We nearly hit you.
The Enterprise has been caught up in a temporal causality loop, and I suspect that something similar may have happened to you.
You must be mistaken. We left Starbase only 3 weeks ago.
Captain, do you know what year this is?
Of course I do. It's 2278.
Perhaps you should beam aboard our ship. There's something we need to discuss.